Welcome everyone, today we have a new build for Diablo 4 Season 5. And looking behind me, yes, we're back to the Bash Barbarians. And I really wanted to see how powerful the Bash Barbarians in the late game. So let me see if I can find a good capture of the Barbarians damage for you guys. And let's have a look. So here at the moment I post on this particular replay, you can see we were critical hitting with overpower with 1.2 billion and also 1.1 billion with a Bash Barbarian. And yes, it's a little harder to catch numbers because the Bash Barbarian does have a very quick attack and the numbers are flashing. So the Bash Barbarian can definitely work in Season 5. And in this video, we'll have a look at the gear requirement, the combos, and also the stats you need to make it work, and also to be able to clear tier 8 against the Horde, and how can you have some fun with a good Season 4 Bash Barbarian even after the changes with Season 5. And yeah, it is pretty decent, very fast attack speed, and it is very satisfying to become the boss killer. Now on the topic of a boss killer, let's have a look at the demonstration of my friend showing off with the Duriel with Uber bosses. So here he's carrying a 4-man Duriel, and you can see it is fast because he's critical hitting for a few hundred million and sometimes over 1 billion. Duriel does die in a few seconds. And just to show you guys again, yes, it's pretty much him against the boss with 4 different friends, and this is really fast. And well, if you guys are looking for a boss slayer, the Bash Barbarian is definitely up there. So before we jump into the guide video, I'll quickly show you guys my friend Bob's stats before we do anything. And you gotta see, his critical rate is about 67% before he casts any shells and before he uses any potions. Over 4,500 critical damage because he is using a lot of stats into heavy-handed and also with a 2-handed weapon with the grandfather. And there's that all damage increased by 1,000%, damage is with basic damage over 1000%, damage while berserking, and also additional physical damage. And at the end of the video, we'll go through the gears and also stats, and you can see he has managed to get plus rank 31 onto Bash, 4 onto the hat, 10 onto the gloves, and then over here he does have 7 onto the pants. Together with a unique weapon, later I'll show you guys over here. So together with a plus 5 to basic skills onto the unique weapon, yes, he could go even higher, but already plus 31, he was quitting for 1.1 and also 1.2 billion using this build. Now I'm sure most of you guys are not a stranger to the Bash Barbarian because this is from Season 4, but as a brief summary for those that is new to this particular build. So what's happening is you're boosting your basic spell with Bash with your master crafting, with any gear stats that plus skill rank, and also with basic attack speed. Together with 4 bashes that guarantees an overpower hit, and with critical hit of Hammer of Ancient, you'll be boosting your damage even further. We're massively stacking critical rate and also critical damage, and together with the shouts and also summoning engines, this allows us to have a massive boost of damage directly onto Bash. And quickly you can see, few hundred millions and also 1 to 2 billion damage can be dealt very quickly because of this build. So coming over to our builder's guide for this Bash Barbarian. And before we dive into the guide, a big thank you to my friend Q0, who has made a really cool Nightmare Dungeon 100 guide back in Season 1, if you guys remember. So he was a Barbarian friend that was showcasing and who loves to play Barbarian. So this is his particular build video, and also using the stats and also testing, he has been farming for the entire week since the launch of the game. So while all of us are busy playing Rogue, Druid, and also Sources, my friend has been farming and also grinding all of his gears with Masterwork to level 12. The Bash Barbarian will be using 3 different shouts, together with Call of Ancient, which will boost his attack speed and also damage. Bash and also Hammer of Ancient will be the focus, and Hammer of Ancient is a buff spell that increases damage with Bash, which I'll go through the skill rotation. We'll be using the Weapon Mastery for 2-handed axe for increased vulnerability and also critical rate against vulnerable enemies. Now this is gonna be an ultimate endgame build for the Barbarian, because you'll be using 4 different uber unique items with Harlequin's Quest, Terror's Might, Ring of Stardust, and also the Grandfather. Because the arsenal system, Barbarian can use multiple uber uniques, and this allows us to equip multiple weapons and really get the damage boost coming from those, uber uniques that give us special effects. especially with higher critical damage and even higher critical damage with heavy-handed. Now in terms of uniques, we're using the Pengover garnets over here to gain a massive boost to the ranks to bash with basic skills, and this also gives us AoE damage. We're using the new seasonal weapon, which is a unique sword, the Shard of Fetheth, and this particular shard will give us even higher increased damage and allows us to spend Fury, our primary resource for bash, to deal even higher damage. So this is a pretty good sword, and I was interested after seeing this sword to test out the bash barbarians. Now for the two-handed mace weapon, we'll be using damage enemy with basic skills will stack up with increased basic skill damage and also increased movement, and also have empathic reach. For the one-handed weapon, we'll be using the Edge Master aspects, which allows us to deal up to 20% increased damage with having higher fury. And in terms of the amulet, we'll be using the aspects of adaptability. This is the ideal aspect that allows us to deal the highest damage while gaining higher resource, because we're spending furies with bash now, and this allows us to both gain resource and also deal more damage. We'll be using the utility ring aspects with Bolt Chieftain to allow us to reduce cooldowns of shouts, which in return boost the damage, give us unstoppable and also gain tons of fury. Now for defensive capacities, we'll be having aspect of might. Very straightforward, 20% damage reduction because we're always using basic spells. And finally, the aspect of concussive strikes will allow us to have even more chances to daze and also stagger enemies, and against enemies who are dazed will provide us up to 20% increased damage. Now in terms of the gem socketing, you will be going with Choppers for even higher basic skills. And as you can see in the strength and also weakness, the build is extremely well in dealing single target damage and also carrying through any of the boss fights in the game. The downside of the build is that it is a little slower to clear a lot of mobs on the screen because you're only using bash. And as you can see in the video, the AoE clear radius is sizable, but you have to angle yourself correctly to hit multiple targets. And this might mean that you have to focus on one boss at a time if there are multiple bosses. Now briefly going through the skills. We'll be having bash to level 5, and also having bash critical 4 times allows our next core skill to overpower. This is essential because once you overpower with Helm of Engine, you'll be dealing additional 40% multiply of damage. So Helm of Engine become a buff spell. The rest of the spells are pretty straightforward. You have 3 shouts to rotate to allow you to reduce cooldowns. You'll be gaining additional fury and also additional damage through Warcry. We'll be stacking more skill points towards Warcry to deal even more damage. We're quite defensive with those defensive perks, having longer duration and also more damage reduction. Over here we have even higher critical damage and also critical rate and also bonus damage while fortified. And in terms of the passive for the Core of Engine, we're using this ultimate because it provides us with bonus attack speed and also multiplier of damage. As we spend fury with basic attacks, we'll be getting additional life. And here, 3 points into heavy-handed will give us a lot of critical strike damage bonus, and this is a multiplier that goes with the grandfather. And as you guys can see in the video replay, my friend was able to get +7 to heavy-handed. So together he have +10 rank to heavy-handed, which dramatically boosts his critical damage. And finally, we'll be dealing additional damage while becoming Berserk, so having the key passive for the Unconstrained allows us to deal the highest damage. Briefly going through the Paragon board of this Barbarian, we'll be running with 6 different glyphs, and just going through the glyphs, we'll be using Exploit for vulnerability damage and also additional damage. We'll be using Wrath for even higher critical strike damage. We'll be using Ire because Barbarian is always going to Berserk, and here we have Might, which allows us to increase damage with 2-handed weapons. Having Martial is essential to lower the shot's cooldowns, and finally having Untaunted allows us to have more damage while fortified and also having damage reduction. Now before we jump over to the skill rotations, it's important we come over to the gameplay loop. It is very simple to play the Bash Barbarians. You want to shout when there are multiple people around you, and you want to shout to gain Unstoppable and also to gain additional fury. As you hit enemies with Bash, there is gonna be an icon that shows you have hit and also critical hit 4 times with Bash. So this is why you both want the attack speed and also critical chance. And once you've hit 4 times with Bash critical hits, you want to cast Hammer of Vengeance that boosts your damage by 40% and then repeat this pattern. And then finally casting Call of Vengeance will allow you to deal the highest damage. So let's come over to the replays. I want to focus on teaching you guys the rotation. It is very simple, and what I want to show you guys is the Bash Barbarian have quite low of a cooldown because you're running a lot of cooldown reduction on your shots. And you're not very cooldown dependent. And in terms of the hits and also damage, because you have this particular icon over here, yes, it has so many icons, it's actually hard to spot. The moment this little bash hand icon becomes 4, you want to be hitting enemies with Hammer of Vengeance, and that is the only time you use Hammer of Vengeance. So this allows you to guarantee an overpower hit with Hammer of Vengeance that boosts your damage for the next 5 seconds. And because you have so much attack speed, you'll always guarantee you maintain this buff to deal the highest damage. Now in terms of the build, I do believe my friend has the build pretty much maxed out, and you guys can see the damage numbers, and there's like billions of damage, and also most of the hits are 200, 300, 5 or 600 million damage. And this really allows you to have the satisfaction feel with the Bash Barbarian. So what I do now is I'll provide the rest of the gameplay replay, which is not very long because he actually killed them really fast. And this is when he demonstrates the stats of his gears. And you can also see on the builder's guide what are the gears you want to be focusing. And it did take him a week, guys, to get everything ready to hit some of the masterworks and also to farm for this Barbarian build. So very excited to show you guys that Bash Barbarian can still work in Season 5. And let me know in the comments, guys, have you tried the Bash Barbarian and what do you think about Barbarians for this particular season?
Greetings.